All right, thank you guys for joining us. As Scott mentioned, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and I have the privilege of speaking with two people who are quite literally in the middle of actively already preparing for what's going to happen with NIL. Now, you guys, we have been talking about this for probably months and months. I mean, it's been, at least 18 months since states started passing legislation and then the NCAA started taking steps. So you guys have been preparing for something that we actually don't even know yet what it's going to officially look like. We're going to have to wait till January when there's an official vote, and then we're going to find out what the actual rules and regulations are going to be. So Stephanie, I want to start with you. How has LSU been starting to prepare in advance, in anticipation, not yet knowing exactly what's coming?
I think there's a lot to it, right? So we first started to have to understand where things were with the NCAA as well as with Congress. So we spent a lot of time understanding that, working with the conference, and deciding what we wanted to do in terms of being proactive and being on the front end of it. I'm on a task force with Lead One. And so that also helped the conversation so that we're constantly talking about it. What we would tell our coaches all the time is we don't know where this is going and we don't understand it completely, but anything you can do to read and understand what people are saying out there is how we all need to be educating ourselves. And then in the early summer, somehow Casey and I got connected. I think it was through a variety of sources, which is normal for our profession. And the more I talked to Casey, the more I realized how much is out there and how much is unknown, and what we should be doing to prepare well in advance of the NCAA passing any legislation as well as.
And Casey, I want to turn it over to you. You guys work with Texas as well as LSU in sort of this NIL advisory capacity. So how are you guys and how are companies like yours, we've seen tons of partnerships sort of preemptively throughout the college space. How are you guys assisting with prep, and what are you finding your role really turning out to look like right now?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I want to thank Sportico, Emily, for you, Emily, and Scott, and everybody, and Mike, everybody at Sportico for having us. And happy Veterans Day to everyone. Is my sound okay? Because I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my end. Emily,
I can hear you. I can hear a little feedback, but
okay,
I can also hear you.
Thank you for having me and Stephanie and I. And like Stephanie said, we got connected early in the summer, and the way at Altius we're thinking about NIL is really both holistically on a horizontal level and a vertical level. And what I mean by that is there's going to be a lot of impacts of these rules at the school level that are they're going to be broad sweeping across all the different departments. So my background is in the NFL world, and there's an entire ecosystem in place in professional sports for NIL. So there are valuable pieces of that ecosystem, right? There are agents, there are marketing reps, there's the union, which won't be in place in the collegiate landscape. There are managers, advisors, there are sponsors and the brands and social media companies. And as our team looked at NIL rule changes early in the summer and then the spring, it was really like a mapping whiteboard process of, okay, it's going to impact athlete branding. We know that we've seen a lot of that. It's going to impact compliance. It's going to impact fundraising. It's going to impact corporate partnerships. And we've heard a lot of discussions around will the student athletes be allowed to do NIL deals with a corporate partner? Yes or no? With a competitor of a corporate partner? Yes or no? And what are the impacts of all of that? And then, of course, the biggest one is student athlete education. Our vision, or our vision and mission at Altius is to work with people like Stephanie and schools like LSU that are really thinking proactively for how they're going to teach their student athletes how to fish. Because this is one situation where the student athletes are going to have to manage this process on their own, from agents to marketing reps to deals. And the only way to equip them and teach them how to fish is to get ahead of it and to make sure everybody they're interacting with at the university level is fluent on NIL. And that doesn't just mean the rules. It means intellectual property basics. It means, how does this work in the professional context? What questions should you be asking? So that's a long answer to the short answer, which is we are looking at this very broadly and working with Stephanie and her team to make sure everybody on campus who touches a student athlete is fluent and educated on this topic.
Teach them how to fish and they eat for life, right? Especially now, a lot of these deals, I would imagine, we could be seeing some partnerships forged in the college space that transcend to, a player's professional career. And I want to ask you, obviously, a lot of these conversations are focused around football and basketball players, right? We look at someone like Joe Burrow, who I'm sure would have been just as good of an Affleck spokesperson as Nick Saban with the logo-less blue jacket. But we're also, looking at a situation where there could be opportunities for, maybe less name recognizable athletes. So Stephanie, I want to ask you, what sort of opportunities does LSU see here, for say your female student athletes or your Olympic sports student athletes, and then how do you start to prepare to help them for what could be a different set of opportunities?
Yeah. I think there's several components to it. Obviously, there's the education so they understand it, but there's also the branding element. And I think today with every school in America has a life skills, student athlete development, student athlete engagement programs. And we just have to create a component of that is focused on being an entrepreneur, about their brand, about the importance of the messaging that they're doing on social media and understanding how they can capitalize on that. And that it's get our student athletes to understand the importance of that and what student athletes, but after. And so when it comes to Olympic sports or even an offensive lineman that might not get the recognition that the quarterback does, what are we doing to help them and as they navigate their way in this space? Some of the things we've talked about here, obviously, is camps, which was talked about in the previous session. And then things like if somebody's from a small town in Louisiana and their local grocery store wants to give that family, the student athlete's family, $500 to, purchase groceries, and the student athlete has to stand and say that he, frequents that grocery store, whatever that is, making sure that we're allowing a path for the student athletes to be able to capitalize on those types of things. The camps and clinics, if they have a particular business, some of the things we've talked about, whether it is a sunscreen line for our beach volleyball player, or we have a gymnast who already has a couple million followers on one of the social media outlets, and making sure that she has some good advice and some good help to navigate some of those things, and then do our best so that they don't put themselves in a difficult position. And that's, I think, what we all worry about.
Sure. And Stephanie, you just mentioned camps and clinics, but also social media. Casey, can you speak to what you guys see some of those actual market opportunities for this particular group looking like?
For sure. I think Stephanie mentioned several of them. Social media is going to be a major factor, as I think we've all seen, to be a major factor in student athletes being able to maximize their NIL rights, to monetize their rights, and do it in a way that is scalable is close to the right word, right? Because if you think about a student athlete's time commitments already, there aren't going to be a lot of open windows throughout the week to go and spend an hour driving to, say, New Orleans from Baton Rouge and doing a 3-hour shoot and then driving back. So I think social media is first and foremost a really great way for the student athletes to monetize their rights. Though I do want to caution around the number of deals in social media, and then also the dollar amounts associated with those deals. I think there's been a lot of discussion around these big 6-figure NIL deals, and there will be some of those. You mentioned Joe Burrow, obviously last year at LSU would fall into that camp. But I think in terms of the percentage, and if you look at the professional sports landscape, this is true there too, the percentage of men and women professional athletes getting individual endorsement deals or social media deals is pretty low. Let's call it at least under 15%. So then you go, okay, well, what about the rest of the athletes? And Stephanie mentioned the offensive linemen, and she mentioned the local opportunities. I think there will be a lot of opportunities for student athletes at local shoe stores, local pizza places, other local restaurants. You can imagine like a landscaping business starting up and wanting to use the student athlete's name and image in a community like Baton Rouge that cares so much about Tiger football. those sorts of opportunities, I think, are going to be the majority of the quote unquote NIL deals, and taking those are great opportunities, but taking a measured approach at what's realistic and what's not is the only way to go from a recruiting and from the perspective of talking to the student athletes. Because if you don't, the jig is going to be up. It's going to take a year, and the student athletes who were promised certain things or told, promised the stars in terms of six-figure deals, they're going to learn pretty quickly that those aren't there. So you have social media, you have appearances, and then you have autographs. I think autographs will make up a large portion of deals. And again, those are relatively scalable, right? Because if you think about how the like trading card industry works, for example, they will mail a big box of trading cards to professional athletes, and then they can sign them on their own time. So it's not like I have to show up at this time and be there and prep and be there. So I think autographs are going to be big. And then, like I said, the local in-kind deals. So getting free stuff, whether that's meals or shoes or other apparel, in exchange for the use of their NIL.
Stephanie, I'm going to jump in and quiz you. Let me ask you about the pace of change here. We've been discussing NIL for years. Why now? And what was the impetus to put us where we are now on the precipice of actually getting change?
Well, absolutely. The state laws that are being passed. So Casey knows this better than I, but the Florida law comes into place in July. And if we are not prepared and the NCAA hasn't done anything, or there's not federal legislation, we are all going to be at a very significant disadvantage when it comes to recruiting.
Why did this not come from within?
From within college athletics?
Yes, it seems like a very simple question. Why not have this come from within? Why be forced by an outside entity?
Well, I think Jay Billis already covered all of that, right? He talked about our industry and some of the challenges that we've faced and the perspective. So I think that's been well documented.
Casey, let me ask you then: is it short-sightedness though, or just the desire to keep status quo, absent of perhaps seeing a bigger picture and an available larger pool of revenue?
Yeah. Look, I don't live inside the minds of the folks at the NCAA, nor do I live inside the minds of the athletic directors or any of the other the folks who make the decision to the NCAA level. I do know this, and this goes back to my my time at the NFLPA, the Players Association. On the players' side, there is a fundamental difference, whether it's the right or wrong. There's a fundamental difference between the current ecosystem that exists in professional, I'll just say football, in the NFL world than there is in college. And whether that's right or wrong, there's not the infrastructure, the resources, and I'm a little bit biased, but because I was at the PA and for a while, and I'm a big supporter of the PA and the professional landscape. You don't have that in college. And again, whether you have it or not, I think that's a missing gap in college, and there needs to be support at the ground level. And this idea of management versus labor is this concept obviously in professional sports and the working world, and Jay talked a lot about it. Whether we get there or not, whether the NCAA gets there or not, that's not where we're going to be in July or in August when these rules go live. And to Stephanie's point, regardless of how we got here, the student athletes need to have a resource. They have to have a resource, or they're the ones that are going to lose at the very least in the short term. And that's our premise and what we're trying to do with Stephanie at LSU and the folks at Texas and our other folks that we're working with.
Well, we know if there is a void, there will be something rushing in to fill it. Stephanie, do you see any kind of blaring warning signs that there will be predators in the space?
Mm-hmm. I think it is going to be interesting to figure that out. We don't know what the future looks like. We're going to navigate it the best we can and try to be prepared well in advance. But I think some of the things that people are worried about, I'm not sure we're quite as worried as some. Every coach is worried about recruiting, any sort of disadvantages that might come. We also know that we want our student athletes to have people around them that will navigate the space in their best interest. And we're not always confident that that happens. And so what can we do from that end to protect our student athletes, to ensure that the players that they are working with, that are guiding them on these deals, have them as their best interest, and that they're not signing contracts that are might hurt them in some way. In terms of like, I don't know, boosters involvement or paying kids or whatever, some of those things, that's stuff you worry about today, regardless of NIL. I think for us, we don't want to have bad agents or bad marketing reps kind of trying to find our student athletes behind a building or whatever and do something that would be not in their best interest. And that is a big concern for us.
Yeah, for both of you, what about the modeling that Jay and I discussed in terms of the NCAA and the member institutions having the infrastructure to perhaps best service not only the needs of the athlete, but the university as well, working together to maximize revenue and sort of take away some of the, I would say, the inherent risks that we're talking about?
Stephanie, you wanted me to hop in on that one, or?
I'm muted. Oh, there. I think they're controlling my mute because there's some background noise. So I actually go for it, Casey, because I'm not sure I exactly understood.
Well, Scott, so your question is, in a perfect world, wouldn't it be best if the governing body worked with all of its members in coherence and with the student athletes? That was essentially the question. Better than the situation we find ourselves in now, where you've got the governing body essentially fighting against or putting out proposals that not everybody agrees with.
With numerous outside entities looking to enter the space, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I do think outside entities, no matter what structure you have, the outside entities will have a place, and that includes, by the way, and first and foremost, marketing agents. I mentioned this earlier, but the good representatives are absolutely critical for this ecosystem to work. And that's not a space that I'm personally invested in at all. I have no dog in that race. But look, I think that there are going to be outside entities no matter what the ecosystem looks like. In a perfect world, to answer your question directly, would it be better for the NCAA and the governing body to be in perfect harmony with each one of the schools and the conferences? Absolutely. I can't tell you why that's not the case. I bet you and I could have a long discussion about that. But the fact of the matter is, we're here. It's now, and in 8 months, something's going to happen. And do I think that's a good thing? Absolutely. But the key is, like, there needs to be support from all angles, and there needs to be people who facilitate these deals, which the schools will not, which our company will not. There needs to be brands that are hiring these student athletes and understand what it means to work with a student athlete. And so the entire ecosystem needs good people who understand the rules and also understand the basics of NIL and endorsement and how it works in the professional context.
Stephanie, have you heard from school partners already, sponsors, partners saying, how can we get involved? Can you help us?
There is at a minimal level, but it's not extensive. No, our multimedia rights partner has been with us, and they have a chance to work with Casey and start to prepare for some of these things that are coming, but the rules still aren't clear. Can they work with sponsors and still be sponsors? Can they use the marks? All of those types of things. So we're still waiting for some of that to be worked out.
Okay, well, Stephanie and Casey, thanks so much for taking some time and joining us and helping us get a little smarter. Emily, sorry I jumped in on you like that. Hopefully we can hear you again. But guess what? We have Mike McCann coming back up with Senator Roger Wicker. So I'm sure once again we are about to get even smarter. Mike, I'm ready for you to come and join us and take it away. There he is.